Hello again, I'm Doug Smith, and welcome to the 3 May 2019 edition of Portsmouth This Week. Our special guests today are Melville Park committee members, in fact, the chair and the vice chair, Ed Rizzi, who's the chair, Jeff Richard, who's the vice chair. Welcome both of you gentlemen. This is a fascinating topic that everybody in Portsmouth needs to know about, I think. But before we get into Melville Pond and the park and all this stuff, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your personal background and how you guys got involved in this to begin with.
Well, let Ed start because he's the senior guy here.
That's okay.
Right. In age as well as beauty.
Well, seniority means something on
That's
this
true.
program.
No, the park was originally, it was given to the town in a convoluted fashion. Originally it was Portsmouth property. Actually, a couple of farms occupied the land. When World War II was imminent, the government took it over. WPA came in and they added more ponds, which we believe are silt traps. So they ended up with a string of 9 ponds. Okay, and the Navy maintained that area from 1941 up to 1973. When the Navy left, after a couple of years, they transferred the land to the Department of Interior, which gave it to Portsmouth. And Portsmouth, the town of Portsmouth, was trying to figure out what do we do with this land, right? There were, outdoor recreation was required, passive recreation, which meant people had to monitor the trails, which would cost money. So we were encouraging them at the time to also put in a campground, because we know that there's a neighboring community whose name I will not mention, had a lovely campground making a lot of money by Second Beach. So we pushed for it, and they finally got a campground started in about 1982. 1983.
Okay, now, did you have a committee at that point?
Yes, we started 1979.
Okay, and how long have you been in the committee?
Well, the first committee was from 79 to 83. When the campground started, we disbanded. Okay. There was another interim committee in the 1990s, and then in 2001, they decided that they needed a committee again, so they raised the flag, and a couple of us who were on the original committee and a bunch of other new guys came on board, and we've been pursuing it ever since.
Okay, so you've basically been in on this from the beginning then?
Yes.
Pretty much.
I used to live in Portsmouth. I was in the neighborhood of Melville. We used to go over there on our own with our family, so I was familiar with the territory.
Okay, great. As you know, we consider ourselves islanders now. It's not just the 3 communities. We're all on Aquidneck Island. Jeff, I know you've been involved in this for quite a while too. How did you? Give me a little bit about your background. In fact, I'll get back to, because I want to hear what your professional backgrounds are too. Let me go to you though. How did you get involved with the committee?
Well, the Navy brought me here to Portsmouth, as it is wanted to do. And I had a lot of scouting behind me. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And then, of course, in 1993, I retired from active duty and said, no, I really need to find something to do. Yeah. And so I found out that Mr. Rizzi over here was, partially owning a whole bunch of acres of woods. I said, sign me up. So I marched into the first committee about 10, 11 years ago. And we've been ever since. And it's, as Ed said, it's bounced around in terms of who was there and what the charter was. And when we first started out, I'm deviating from background here, but we'll talk to that, I'm sure, someplace in the program. We now actually have our own budget now.
Yeah,
but anyway, me personally,
now.
Absolutely right. Let's see, in my personal part of it is, besides the vice chair, I'm also acting treasurer, so I have to go in and do that part of it too, because we do have a budget and we follow it. The other thing that I do that's kind of fun is that I was never really a really ardent fisherman. However, we stock, the state stocks, the upper pond, the Great Pond, Thurston Great Pond, and the lower pond, which we call Pond 9. They do that a number of times a year.
Yeah.
So I am in the position of getting the call from the state saying the fish are on the way. I then call my friend in the Public Works Department of the base who has the keys to open the gate that lets the truck go down so they can put fish in the lower pond.
So they come in from the bottom.
Yeah. So exactly.
Yeah.
So the delivery method in the Gray Pond is through a chute, but in the lower pond they have to dip into the tank with a net and walk the fish down to the water. So just a sidebar here. To get ready for the opening day of fishing season this year, I got the call, and so we all met down there, and I watched them the state put 650 trout in the lower pond and 650 trout in the gray pond. Half of those fish were goldens, which has never happened before.
I think I saw a Facebook post or
Yes,
something
you
about
did.
that,
There was
yeah.
a Portsmouth patch. I think the
Yeah.
cover was a picture of a golden trout.
Yeah, show what it looked like, yeah.
So the state does raise these. Of course, they're neutered, so you've got to raise them
Yeah.
one time only.
So you guys, you don't stock them yourself?
No,
DEM stocks it, but you
Right.
assist in...
We do.
And the
Only
physical-
because until such time as we get possession of the tank farms, the fence will be
Yeah.
up and locked, and the government will
Yeah,
not
that'll
let
be
us.
another question down the road here.
Absolutely right.
All right,
so
so-
it's I was a surface line officer like you, and I commanded a ship, and I said, okay, that was fun. Let's get on to the next event.
Yeah,
And we've
Absolutely.
been here in Portsmouth ever since.
Well, if anybody looked around, they'd find that a lot of retired Navy officers
Yes.
are doing things in town. You know, it seems to be a penchant. Now, let me get back to you and your background, because you're basically a scientist, right?
Yes, well, I got my degrees in experimental psychology.
Wow.
And after my 4 years in the Air Force, okay, we're working on system development, I was looking for a safe place to raise children. And I brought my wife to this area in February, and she saw Ocean Drive, and that kind of locked it in, right?
Okay.
So I spent 33 years at Raytheon
Yeah.
doing system development. And after I retired, what was it? My gosh, in 2001, I went back to teaching, and I had to relearn academic psychology, which is very different to what I was doing in the engineering area.
Where did you teach?
Roger Williams.
Okay.
First at Rick, and then at CCRI, and
Right,
then
right.
Roger Williams, which is handy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we got a professional Navy background, which basically, as far as I'm concerned, qualifies you for everything, and a scientific background. I'm not biased or anything. No.
Wait, I will point out, though, that Jeff was able to talk between the town government, the state
Yeah.
DEM, and the federal government to open gates. So that's a remarkable achievement all by itself.
Absolutely, that they listen is the
That's right.
important part.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the pond or the park itself. We've got a map here, and I hope we can try to bring it up. You want to just talk about how big it is, what kind of facilities it's got, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I'll take
Go
that
ahead.
one. Okay.
Sure. Yep.
Last time when I was sitting in the chair that you have, I had glasses on, but I've had cataract surgery. So you now look very good. But I
Very
can't.
good.
I can't
I should
see.
give some to my wife.
I can't see the words on this paper though without these. So it's one of those.
You don't have to apologize for glasses.
You give up,
We're okay with that.
or you do. All right. We talked a little bit about the history of how the Navy gave up the property, but it's about 152 acres, almost all woods, and the 9 ponds. We talked a little bit about the importance of the upper pond. It's only about 3.5 meters deep, and it's the feeder pond, and it goes into one to the next to 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down till pond 8 dumps water into pond 9, which is what we call the lower pond.
Okay, so the upper pond would be Thurston Gray Pond?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
That's right. Thurston was on our committee, and he was extremely active for a lot of years, and unfortunately we lost him a little while ago. So we mulled it over in the committee and said, what can we do to remember Thurston Gray?
Sure.
The town council said, that's a great idea. So that's how it became Gray Pond. So all the trails have been created by us, by the committee. Some with a little help from a lot of Boy Scout efforts have gone into maintaining this thing, building bridges over where the water is. But meanwhile, all the trails that are there, and I'm not sure that you can see the coloring all that well.
Can't really see the trails, I don't think, but you can see the park area anyway.
Right.
Right. Our job on the committee is to either do it ourselves or hire somebody to do it or get Public Works to do it to keep the trails open. And that's not easy, because when the good Lord says, let's have a storm,
Yeah, branches and-
knock, some of the trees are really old.
Impressive, yes.
Yeah, and they fall down, and we have a
Bittersweet.
bittersweet problem that the infectious, invasive rather, climbs the trees and eventually gets so heavy that it topples the trees over.
Yeah.
You know. But we have, of course, you mentioned we got 2 tenants now on there. besides the campground, which I looked at the interview you had with Justin May, who's we have leased essentially all that property to the Mays to run a campground, and he's very efficient and they're doing a great job down there. And then we have another tenant, which is relatively new,
Yep.
and that is the dog park. When she ran all around town trying to find somebody who would say, okay, you can have a few
Bunny-
acres.
Bunny Miller.
Bunny Miller.
Oh, yeah.
And she finally came to the committee meeting and she said, please, you guys are the last hope. So we thought, well, it's a whole pile of the park which is completely unused and overgrown with vegetation. She said, that's yours, Bunny.
Yeah.
And by God, she went to it.
That was a great move. It's a perfect
Yeah.
fit, I think.
Yeah.
For,
Oh, it is, absolutely. The
There's a
people who from the campground are, and all over town now, we've very, very good decision.
yeah.
Now, of course, we do have people who like to walk through the park with their animals.
Yeah.
And recently, the town council voted 6-0 not to let the dogs off the leashes.
Yeah.
So that was an
That's
issue.
kind of the same everywhere in town now,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
it is. But there are an awful lot of people who have dogs and they love to run around Melville Park.
All right,
So-
let's get back to a little bit to your committee and what
Okay.
your responsibilities are. Maybe I'll go back to you, Ed. You can
Okay,
start,
sure.
and both of you guys can chime in.
Right. Well, the first thing we do, those 5 trails, we have to maintain them because I've been down there all kinds of throughout the year, and there's almost always somebody down there either fishing or walking trails. Okay, so actually, as Jeff pointed out, we do have fallen trees. Sometimes we can clear them, sometimes we can't. We've got to call Public Works to clear them. We've also put up signage on the trails, so they're marked, so you're not going to get lost. We always say that if you walk too far east, you'll hit West Main Road. Too far west, you'll be in the bay, so you can't, and there are fences
Yeah.
all, on both sides. You can't really get lost. So we maintain those trail markings. Also look at the condition of the interior roads. We have a couple of interior roads we use, and as a matter of fact, just recently, because of the wet weather we've had, they got churned up pretty badly by probably by the utility company trying to maintain their lines. So we have ruts and whatever. We've had 25 Eagle projects at the park since
Eagle
1980.
Scout project, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, including actually the first trail was put in by an Eagle Scout back in 1980, and they put in bridges and birdhouses and bat houses and you name it, right? And picnic benches.
Yeah.
And also we've been trying to remove the silt from one of the silt ponds to see if we could restore it. It used to be. They tell me that it used to be a fishing hole for kids. Well, right now it's full of bulrushes and so on. There's barely enough room for frogs. You'd like to restore that if we could, but that's a long, involved process.
Okay, but the 2 large ponds are open for fishing.
Oh, yes.
During the season, I
Correct.
guess, right? Yeah, you guys have a lot of things to do down there, and I take it you're pretty much hands-on and doing a lot of this stuff yourselves.
Well, we'd like to. Originally, we were designated as an advisory group, but we both events of the committee, we have outdoor people, who either campers or hikers or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's not just simply telling the town council you have to spend money here, but rather we'll do it ourselves if we can, and if we can't, then we'll figure out what we do.
Over the course of time, we've had storage facilities provided to us by the old campground, but now we have a converted pump house that we call the ski lodge, for lack of any other explanation, with a door that has a lock on it, and in it we keep an awful lot of equipment. We have a great big pushing mower, a bush hog, yeah, and a lot of cutting tools, like all gas-driven power tools. So we have a ton of power tools, and we put them to use. And I've used my own chainsaw down there numerous times, but we get to the point where our limited amount of equipment doesn't get the job done. We call Public Works, and our town Public Works people have been as responsive.
No, they are dynamite. They are the best.
Unbelievable.
as far as I'm concerned.
All it takes is I can walk in the door and say, Brian, hey, bang,
Yeah.
there. I mean, it's
Well, it
fantastic.
seems to me that you need a cast of thousands to keep this place up, but your committee is not that big.
True, we've been as many as 13, okay? which is probably an unlucky number. But we've been diminished. People, they lose interest, okay, or they age out,
Yeah.
or they move. Yeah, so we've lost some. But also on occasion, if we got something which Public Works can't handle, we do have enough money in our budget, we can go hire a local contractor to perform work on roads and trails. Yep.
Now, would you guys like new members?
Oh,
I
we'd
mean,
love
you'd like
new
to,
members.
I assume you'd like to get some more
That would
fresh
be a
blood
good
in
thing.
there.
Yeah, obviously we're open to new members. Actually, we're talking to two young guys who are fishermen. Maybe we can encourage them to join us.
Paul Keston's son,
Oh, yeah.
be one
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
He came to a meeting and they were talking about a variety of fish that might be stocked in the future, and so we got them at least tentatively interested.
Yeah.
I got their emails.
Okay, well, that's the case.
Right.
Now,
True.
how would people first find out a little bit more about you? I understand you used to have a website. I'm not sure. Apparently you still do because Gary found it.
Right. It's on the town website under Melville. Our meetings are the first Wednesday of the month. Okay. They ought to come to a meeting and listen in and find out what we do.
Okay.
And immediately, because they're citizens, okay, they can make suggestions. Right. If they're interested, I have some forms.
Application
for them,
forms for the
Application
committee.
forms. They fill it out, bring it to the town clerk. Town clerk offers it to the town council, and the town council approves them, and we have a new member.
Okay, so the first Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock, I think it is?
Yes.
In
At
planning
the
office.
town hall.
The planning office, it's posted in town hall and also on the Department of State website.
Okay, now, if somebody wanted to just contact you to ask you some questions about it, how could they do that?
Oh, well, you have an email address for me?
Yeah, I think they've got
yeah,
your
he does.
email stuff.
Yep,
There's
yep,
yours.
There's
Ed.
one.
There's your
RizzyNRI@yahoo.com. I'm also in the phone book, the only R-I-Z-Y in the state, so, okay? That's why it's
So people can find
RizzyNRI,
it. Yeah,
right?
right.
Okay? Or you can contact Jeff. Jeff is available.
I'm
Okay,
at 683-6791.
okay, now,
That's my wife's home phone number.
okay. So if I was somebody that was going to be able to do this, I think I would want to talk to somebody first, see what the requirements are.
We've tried a few ways, and this program is certainly one of them, but we've done winter walks, and we just got through with a spring walk where we advertise the availability of the park for people to come down, do a walk, and actually get awarded a medal. We have a Melville Park medal, suitable for hanging around your neck.
Okay,
And we have done that in the past, so that does attract some. Key element, I think, is in terms of our future plans, what kind of people do you need? Let's say, for instance, the Navy gives up the tank farms. The fence goes away. What do you want to do with the park? Right now, we have to open gates to
Yeah.
get fish down. Make that go away. If the town of Portsmouth then owns the road and owns the access to it, the number of things that you can do just go up exponentially. Because right now people get the sense that, well, wait a minute, it costs money for you to go to the campground. And they sometimes don't separate the campground from the park.
Park, sure.
Sure, but that's a mindset that has caused lots of people not to visit the park.
Yeah,
It's if you did a body count and you walk down the street, any street in Portsmouth, and say, "Have you ever been to Melville Park?"
yeah.
You would be disappointed at the number of
Well,
yeses.
oddly enough, the Portsmouth Historical Society, we feel the same
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
People have driven by it thousands of times.
Well, that's
They've
true.
never stopped in, but hopefully after this show, maybe some people will come down and take a look and
We have gotten
get
through to
involved.
town hall at least, because they used to refer to it as the campground. And I was saying that's only 30 acres of our 152 acres, so,
Yeah.
there's something else there too.
And the thing is, you talked about the tank farms. How do you guys relate to the Tank Farm Advisory Committee or whatever it's called these days?
We put in a request to have I think Jeff sees a lot more activity, okay, of the town in that, but what I was just requesting they do is they take the current fence, okay, and move it over
To the other side of the road.
to the other side of the road so we can get rid of a couple of gates. So if the state wants to come in and stock fish, they have to get through one gate and that's it. They can get to the lower pond.
Yeah,
But that advisory group, which we just had a little controversy about how many people should be
exactly,
on it,
yeah.
they have a broader scope of interest now than they had before, which was only
Yeah.
tank farm. And the Navy I guess because of the brown ground issues, the contamination issues, not moving off the dime. And nobody has wrote the check for a couple $1 billion to have that lovely view. You know.
Yeah. Well, I've been, for 15 years, I've been hearing about all this Navy property that we're finally going to get. And that, I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, but that's on our future plan. That's the vision that I have. That expands the park to be more than it is. We had talked about putting something down on what we call the trailhead, or the track goes. The park grounds go all the way to the water. Now, that happens to be the railroad line goes right close to the water. So we thought, well, maybe we'd be, if these people get a ride out to our area, that they could get off and spend some time in the park, and there's a gazebo there or some kind of a way to get people into the park.
Actually, right now, some of the workers over at the boatyard come over there. They walk down the tracks for lunch, and they have lunch. We have one picnic bench down there. We had one that was destroyed by vandals, and the wreckage is still there. We've just moved another one, and Jeff wants to put a more permanent concrete picnic bench that vandals cannot even eat when they tried.
We bought
one.
Yeah.
One of those cement picnic tables, and it's up at the Gray Pond.
Yep.
So if you put in the parking lot there, you immediately look, and it's going to be there
Solid.
long before the
Solid
next
stuff.
time bomb goes off. So we need to buy another one that somebody cannot make a mess out of. And put it down there.
I know at one point in one of the iterations of the advisory committee, the tank farm, they had talked, either they or the town had talked about having a buffer zone between the park and whatever that ends up going into Melville, which might be a way, like you say, there's a way to do it because you got physical things that kind of demarcate.
Sure.
So the West Side master plan is, blew up in smoke. I mean, nobody talks about it. Now the comprehensive plan is the next thing that's going to probably blow up in smoke. But
I don't like to hear that because I think that's an important thing.
It is. I personally, this is Jeff Richard, my dream is we're going to take the top of that hill, right where the campground office is, the top of that hill. And I don't care if it's got contamination. We're going to turn that thing into a regional recreation center with parking lots and cement disses and a swimming pool and
We can call it Love Canal too.
and an ice rink. All the things that are missing because we don't really have a recreation department that the Melville Park Committee cannot go and have a long conversation with the Recreation Committee. Doesn't exist.
Right, I know the town's trying to improve that and give her more scope.
It's an absolute need we have in our town.
Now, I know one of the issues every year that I see in the paper is the algae bloom issue. And how deep did you say that Thurston Pond?
It's only 3.5 meters.
3.5 meters,
Yes.
okay.
Right now it is. It's normally a little less, but we've had so much rain. We just measured it yesterday, and it's
Okay.
3.5.
So that's reasonably deep, I guess.
And pretty flat in the center.
Yeah.
Because I think at one
Now,
time
what is it that causes the algae bloom? Or is that what you're trying to find out?
fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphates, coming off of lawns and also out of more maybe septic fields. Okay,
It's not just us.
Yeah.
Up and down, all around the East Coast, all around the country.
No, yeah, I understand
Algae
that.
blooms. I mean, I've been down in the Virginia area and watched major parks that were shut down totally
Yeah.
because the water was completely algae.
I listened to a presentation by a contractor. It's possible that we could aerate the pond in such a way as to prevent algae blooms. I just heard a long 1-hour presentation. Sorry, I fell asleep during it. It wasn't very illuminating, but we'll have the contractor send a representative down and talk to us. First of all, how effective can it be? And secondly, can the town of Portsmouth afford it, given our budget, or how much over our budget we could go to solve it? Because right now we're spending $3,600 a year just to treat the pond, of the algae bloom. And they have to be careful at a certain time they have to treat it because otherwise they release more toxin. So they phase it according to the
Either it's
weather.
when they try to fix it, they make it worse.
Exactly. And these people are experts, so but we have to find out if there's something else we can do.
Yeah, I noticed somehow on the town website or somewhere in there on your page, it talked about a Roger Williams community project that you've asked for to come in and take a look at this. And I mean, these guys obviously have the expertise and the scientists and other people that could do this stuff. Have you heard anything about that? Has Roger Williams got back to you, or is it too soon? Or
I think it's too soon. We're still. They said that they're considering. They said they were going to get back to us in a couple of weeks.
okay,
And that was about a week and a half ago, so pretty soon. That would be useful for us to, what we've done in the past is we've taken soil samples and had them tested to find out if there's anything harmful in the silt, and it's clean from that regard. They might be able to assist that and do a biosurvey to find out what we could disturb legally that DEM would allow us to do and what we have to leave alone. So it's possible that they could recommend some kind of short-term remediation.
yeah.
Okay.
Now, have you guys considered grants or anything for? Everything costs money, as we
true,
mentioned
true.
before. I don't know if grants from the federal or state government or other
You know any good grant writers?
Sierra Club or people like that.
Yeah, a lot of the
The
federal,
issue, I think, in all over Portsmouth is who writes grants? Who actually writes them?
Actually, we at the Historical Society we have a very good grant writer, and I won't
there you
mention
go.
his name, Gary, because I know you don't need any more work. But
Right.
it is an art, I
Yes.
think. So the algae bloom is a key one. That's probably at the top of your priority list. You mentioned invasive species in the woods.
right.
What other major issues do you have?
Well, the notion of invasive species, what we'd like to do eventually is to cull as much of the non-local plant life out and maybe replace it with the help of, let's say, the garden club or something, with flowering plants that will provide
Yeah.
food for the local animals. We have lots of animals, deer, chipmunks, coyotes, ferrets, you name it.
Squirrels.
Oh, don't mention, that's another problem.
They're in a category of their own, I guess.
Yes.
You guys have a lot of stuff going on, and I think it's a perfect opportunity for people to come in and get involved with you folks, and this would be something very worthwhile. We got about a minute and 20 seconds left. Let me just turn it over to you guys to say whatever else you'd like to tell us.
To reiterate, first Wednesday of every month, 7 o'clock, planning at the town hall.
Okay?
Anybody can come visit, and if they got some ideas about how they'd like to see the park used, come in. I just want to make a really important point here, that we in Portsmouth have the benefit of having this 150 plus acres of woods. If you happen to be a Sierra Club member, and you got, as Mr. Rizzi is, you got this, you will discover the importance of parks to the grand scheme of everything,
Yeah.
particularly your kids. So our long-term goal is definitely going to be to try to get as many younger people down into the parks.
Yeah.
And hey, do what you do, run around,
Well, I think
like kids.
I think our generation understands that pretty much, because we used to do it, of course, when we were kids. But now it's a question of all these other competing issues and stuff.
Absolutely right.
But you're absolutely right. Outdoors is where it is. Let me leave the last word to you, Ed. You got about 15 seconds. What would you like to say?
In that regard, we say that photons from the sun are better for your children than electrons from your devices.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. Thank you guys both very much for coming
Thanks
on.
for everybody for
You're
having
welcome.
us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on Portsmouth This Week.